Coming up on Bridge City News, the leader of the Bloc Québécois is demanding that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resign. Reporter Brian Lilly explains how the Trudeau Liberals awarded a contract to a Quebec company to make masks, and that company doesn't have a Canadian factory. And we will explain who will be exempt from wearing a mask in Lethbridge if a new temporary bylaw comes into effect later this month.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Keeping the federal Liberals in power would be more dangerous than the thought of Canadians going to the polls during a pandemic. Now that's according to Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet. Earlier today, he issued an ultimatum to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Finance Minister Bill Morneau. He says if the two of them and Trudeau's chief of staff do not resign, he will try and trigger an election in October.
The question becomes, which is worse? Keeping them and this government in place, or creating a temporary distortion in the management of the crisis in going into an election, which might replace them with people better suited for the job.
Blanchet says revelations in the wheat controversy and new details about a contract for small business and rent relief demonstrate the Liberal government is simply not trustworthy. A company in Quebec was awarded a huge contract to produce over 1 million masks to combat COVID-19. Now, the issue, according to political journalist Brian Lilly, is that this company did not have a Canadian factory to produce the masks for Canadians.
A contract awarded to a company called AMD Medicon. They're out of Pointe-Claire, Quebec. That's in the Montreal area. They closed their factory in Granby, Quebec, just south of Montreal, last year, 2019. They were supposed to be up and running with a new factory and delivering masks by July, but as of this week, no masks delivered, no idea when it'll start happening, and there's a lot of other companies that were able to retool their factories. I think we've got about a dozen in Ontario, and I know there's others in other provinces, other jurisdictions that are already delivering masks.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Lilly, who also has the latest of the We Charity scandal. That's coming up after business news. The RCMP recently implemented a virtual way of reporting crime. Now, if you're a victim of crime under $5,000, you can now report it online. Officers say the new service is an alternative to coming into the detachment.
There's a number of benefits for online reporting. One, it encourages people to report more. If people are busy, they don't have a time during office hours to call, or they don't want to bother an officer when they think they're busy, doing online reporting is simple and easy and a great way of getting through to us. It'll reduce at the detachment level our calls for service, so our members can maybe concentrate on some of the more higher priority calls. And also will help our support staff to do things like security clearances and criminal record checks and that kind of stuff.
Redcliffe RCMP have charged Anwar Cameron of Walsh, Alberta, with 3 counts of assault. Police say it stems from 2 separate incidents on August 8th and 9th when Cameron allegedly assaulted a woman and then 2 men from the same family. He was arrested on the 12th. Police say Cameron will next appear in court in Medicine Hat on September 16th. The family of a missing man says they are wanting his case to be pushed into a criminal investigation instead of just a missing persons case. Marshall Owasso went missing last November from Lethbridge, and a week later, his torch truck was found in British Columbia. No trace of Marshall has ever been found. Marshall's family has gone so far as to hire a private investigator, and they're now drafting an online petition to have police look at his case as criminal.
And that's one thing with the petition that we are looking at that we like is that the people signing the petition are the public, and the public has already paid for the police service. This is a public service. So this is a way for them to also say that, we've paid for this service, but now we want this to be a criminal investigation. So it gives them a voice for what they want with the service that everyone has already bought into and paid. So it gives everyone a little bit of a voice to say if they want it to be investigated criminal or not. And we say that we think it's criminal, but even if it's not, they should investigate it as such so that we can rule that out. Being a criminal case, the police and the RCMP get a lot more resources for that. So even if later on it turns out it's not criminal, this is the way that we figure it out. And the public can help us if they believe that, that's where they want their money going.
Since the province pulled funding for Arches and the Lethbridge Supervised Consumption Site, government officials have now introduced a mobile SCS in our city, and once again, it has been set up near more businesses.
We found out about this just last night, and it's pretty much cut and dried that it's going to be here. They were here this morning doing a test run. Now we all of a sudden see them trenching a big trench and a power wire to power this bus with, so it's coming no matter what. It's going to be on the road in the cul-de-sac, which there are big truck traffic going in and out of the kitchen center in that area. They're not going to be able to have big trucks running into that area anymore, especially when they've got a big mobile bus parked there. For us, we've got customers coming around the corner all the time with RVs. That thing's going to be an eyesore. The people that are in the area, if they want to do it properly, at least come to us beforehand and get some opinion, but nobody bothered to do that. The city, the province, nobody. People defecating in the middle of the day, going to the bathroom, people shooting up in the morning just before they have their breakfast, people shooting up in the afternoons before their supper times. It's unbelievable what happens in this area. And if they were just to ask us some opinion, move that thing in behind there, it's out of sight, out of mind. It keeps that traffic flowing back to where they want to go. They want to go to Galt Gardens. They want to go downtown and hang in that area. If you put them in here, they're going to wander right the opposite way past all the businesses again.
Bridge City News received a release from the consulting firm Collaborative Strategies, which is representing Arches. They say that Arches will no longer be providing needle debris pickup and walking outreach as of August 31st. They'll continue to work with Alberta Health on the wind down of those services and support plans toward a transition. The City of Lethbridge is looking at making mask wearing mandatory at all public indoor facilities and not just those which are city-run. Council will be doing a third reading of the temporary bylaw next Monday, and it could come into effect on August 24th. City officials say it could last until the end of the year. BCN's Micah Quinn was at City Hall. Micah, there are some exceptions for those who do not have to wear a mask, and what are they?
The temporary mask bylaw, drawn up by City Manager Craig Dalton, shows that you won't have to wear a mask if you fall under one of these points. A child under the age of 2, a person unable to wear a mask because of a reason protected under the Alberta Human Rights Act, if you are eating food or drinking in areas like a restaurant, or if you are part of a religious ceremony, engaging in aquatic or physical activities, or providing care to a person with a disability where a mask wouldn't help in assisting that person, and finally, a person who is sleeping in a bed at a homeless shelter.
Thanks so much, Micah. The city says the fine for those who should and do not wear a mask would be $100. Alberta Computers for Schools is partnering up with London Drugs to start a tech drive. Now, the goal of the initiative is to ask for electronics donations for students who are not able to afford them for the upcoming school year. Jeff Thompson from Alberta Computers for Schools says that this is a unique opportunity to work with London Drugs, who will then send the electronics donations to Alberta Computers for Schools to be refurbished.
We try to provide tablets if we get them in, laptops, desktops, and partnering with London Drugs has opened up more donations for us, and hopefully things are a little slow during the COVID time right now, but hopefully partnering with London Drugs will be able to allow us to get more donations and turn things around and get them out to the kids that need them.
For more information on the tech drive, visit the Alberta Computers for Schools website. Tim Hortons Camp Day Canada fundraiser took place across the country today. The Lethbridge Scenic Drive location was buzzing with lots of food and excitement. As Ainsley O'Reilly reports, due to the pandemic, the camp itself will look much different this year from what kids are used to.
The slogan is "Buy a coffee, change a life." For every coffee and iced coffee purchased at Tim Hortons today, all of the proceeds will be going towards Tim's camp. For the first time in 45 years, camps will be conducted virtually.
They're behind the scenes. They figured out a way to do a whole virtual camp. You know, all the activities, there's still the experience.
This year it is a virtual camp. You can also check that out on YouTube online. And Tim Hortons Camp Foundations actually has a whole video on what they're doing for that this year.
Last year, the Tims on Scenic Drive raised nearly $4,000. This year, the goal was $5,000. And with the community's support, they blew past that total by lunchtime.
You know, it's amazing how many people are. It's vibrant, which is what Camp Day is all about. It's about having fun. You know, again, it's all for the kids. hopefully everyone else across the country is doing the same, and we make a tremendous amount of money for the foundation this year.
Whether you bought a coffee or purchased a bracelet, employees say they have seen firsthand the impact those dollars have on underprivileged kids.
They're teaching resilience to kids, they're teaching responsibility, especially friendships.
This changes lives, it changes lives, and to see it firsthand is, it's heartwarming.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Another part of Tim Hortons Camp Day is jail and bail, and one of the convicts at the Scenic Drive Tim Hortons location earlier today was the executive director of the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen.
You think you're doing everything right and people arrest you anyway, but for a really good cause. I'm here just representing myself, I guess, and doing my best to raise some funds for Tim Hortons Camp Day, which we all know is a really important part of what Tim Hortons does. They do much more than serve you great coffee and cappuccinos and good food. They also have a really good program where they give opportunity for disadvantaged kids to go to camp. And this year camp is different. It's a virtual camp, I think, but at the same time it's important for kids to become involved. So that's why I'm here. I've been fortunate to have a number of friends that maybe used to be friends. I've contacted them and they've sent money, and I think we've raised about $1,100, and that goes directly to the folks here at Tim Hortons and for their larger program called Tim Hortons Camp Day. Having 12 grandchildren, having kids get an opportunity to go to camp, especially those that are less fortunate, is really important to me. And if I can do anything at all to help out, it's worth spending time behind these, these tough, big bars that are flexible. And just to be here to give a little bit of time to those in need is important to me as well.
The Alberta government announced today that there were 121 new cases of COVID-19 in our province, bringing the total number of active cases to 1,040. There are 55 here in the South Zone. Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says more than 10,600 Albertans have now recovered from the virus, but at the same time, we've seen 217 deaths from COVID-19, including another one in Edmonton.
Tragically, I am reporting one additional death today at the Good Samaritan Southgate Care Centre. This death occurred yesterday and was reported earlier on their website. My heartfelt condolences go out to everyone who has lost a loved one to COVID-19 or any other cause during this pandemic. The lab has completed more than 8,000 tests in the last 24 hours and more than 785,000 tests overall.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says there's no conflict of interest in the UCP's decision to award contracts to Old Navy and IFR Workwear for reusable masks. The companies have been contracted to provide around 2 million masks for Alberta students and teachers when they return to school in the fall. Critics say IFR Workwear is located in Education Minister Adriana Lagrange's riding and that the company donated to Kenney and past Conservative parties. The Premier says the contracts were handed by an independent third party. The town of Bow Island has been fined $10,000 under provincial environmental laws. The town and a former worker pleaded guilty for failing to take samples of drinking water, which is used to determine if it's free of bacteria. The town was also charged with providing false or misleading information or failing to report any equipment malfunctions. On top of the fine, the town of Bow Island is also placed under a 2.5-year probation order that will check the town's compliance with monitoring and reporting requirements. Chiefs across Saskatchewan descended on the capital yesterday to voice their support of Tristan DeRoche, a young Indigenous man who walked more than 600 kilometers to call for legislative changes to address the region's high rates of suicide.
There is no long-term solution for our people. We don't have the tools, we don't have the funds to save our people. The elders used to say, we should not be burying our young ones. It should be the other way around. But no. It's been going on 40 years now since we've experienced our first suicide in the north. The trend is still climbing. It's a game that we're losing. We had lost so many loved ones. So many of our young people, our elders, are suffering with our young people.
Regina's two largest school divisions are making masks mandatory for grades 4 through 12 when schools reopen in September. Regina Public and Catholic school divisions say they will require students to wear non-medical masks at school when physical distancing is not possible. The public school division is also recommending students in kindergarten through grade 3 wear masks. All staff and visitors will be required to wear masks, as will students and staff who are using Regina Public Schools transportation. With the coronavirus vaccine many months off, companies are rushing to test what may be the next big thing, antibody drugs that fight the virus right away. Now, what's different about this medication is that it would not have to train the immune system to do the job.
It can be given in such a fashion that it diffuses very quickly into the body, all through the body, and you might be able to prevent infection immediately. If we can generate them in large concentration, in big vats, in an antibody factory, we could then give the antibodies directly.
Rather than accept a $100,000 pay cut, Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best says she will retire. The move comes after Seattle City Council approved reducing the police department through layoffs and attrition.
I have no doubt that Carmen Best will continue to lead, continue to fight for what is right, continue to be a voice for equity and changing policing and other systems that have perpetuated inequities and racism. It's unfortunate she will not do it here as our chief of police.
We worked so incredibly hard to make sure that our department was diverse, that reflects the community that we serve. To just turn that all on a dime and hack it off without having a plan in place to move forward it's highly distressful for me, and I really, it goes against my principles and my conviction, and I really couldn't do it.
Now here's something you don't see every day. A swimming wild boar surprised sunbathers in Germany after taking a dip in the Baltic Sea. After the boar cooled off, it charged through a crowded beach before running away. Looked a little bit like Pumbaa from The Lion King, didn't he? Now if you're looking for beach weather, some good news, it is getting hotter. Full weather details are coming up. It was a little cooler today, but still a nice, pleasant summer day. The mercury will be climbing even more over the next week. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the weather picture. Jeanette, we could see 30 degrees again later this week and possibly into next.
Yes, and I personally can't wait for that because I love the hot weather. But first, we have to get through the possibility of some showers tonight and possibly even some thunderstorms. So this evening, partly cloudy skies. We could see a 30% chance of showers with a possibility of some thunderstorms. Overnight low tonight, 8 degrees. And then as we get into tomorrow, actually the sky should clear after midnight tonight, giving us a beautiful sunny sky tomorrow, high of 24 degrees. We could see a southwesterly wind on Thursday. Gusting up to 50 kilometers at times. And then, like I said, it's opening up for some beautiful weather for the rest of the week. Look at these temperatures. Friday, 26, 29 for both Saturday and Sunday. And then look what's going to happen. That temperature is going to rise, as you said, into the 30s, 33 for Monday and 32 for Tuesday. Tuesday, we could see a mix of sun and cloud, but beautiful sunshine the rest of the week. The almanac average for this time of year, 26. 11 is the average low. 37 was our high temperature. That was back in 1940, and 2 was the low temperature in 1966. The sunrise was this morning at 6:18 a.m. and our evening sunset tonight, 8:55 p.m. So there we go, just before that 9 o'clock hour with the sun going down. So what's going on across the rest of the country? So we're going to be seeing lots of sunshine in Victoria. 21 is the high there. 21 also the high for Vancouver with a mix of sun and cloud. Now Calgary could see some showers this evening and thunderstorms just like Lethbridge, but lots of sunshine tomorrow, high of 22 there, and Edmonton could see some decent weather as well with a mix of sun and cloud. Now throughout the rest of the prairies here, we are seeing chances of thunderstorms here in Saskatoon, high 23 tomorrow, 25 in Regina, and 25 also in Winnipeg with those possibilities of those thunderstorms. But over here in central Canada, beautiful clear skies, lots of sunshine, get your sunglasses. Toronto's high at 29, same for Ottawa and Montreal. Should be a beautiful day tomorrow in that region. Atlantic Canada. Now, Fredericton is under a severe thunderstorm watch. They could see up to 10 millimeters of rain this evening, but then clearing up for tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. They are under a heat warning as well, high 29. Heat warnings expected also for the rest of Atlantic Canada. Charlottetown could see a 30% chance of showers tomorrow. Same thing for Halifax, and St. John's, Newfoundland could see a possibility of 60% a chance of rain tomorrow. There we go. That is your weather.
A KFC in Edmonton has gone green because they're coming out with a plant-based meat that tastes like chicken. The product, developed with Light Life Foods, is available in the form of regular or spicy chicken sandwich combos and the popcorn chicken, and the prices are similar to their chicken equivalents. KFC temporarily changed their logo from red to green in honor of their new menu items. A former Starbucks Canada store manager is launching a $60 million lawsuit over unpaid overtime. Trevor Hopman is the lead plaintiff in a proposed class action suit that asks the court to declare that Starbucks violated Ontario's Employment Standards Act. His suit claims Starbucks was wrong to class store managers as exempt from overtime pay for work in excess of 44 hours per week. Unifor was set to begin talks with the Canadian arms of the big three automakers today. Representatives from the union, Fiat Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors have begun negotiating wages and benefits for the next 4 years. The existing agreements expire on September 21st. Even though auto sales have plummeted during the COVID-19 pandemic, the union says they will not accept that as an excuse moving forward. Unifor represents around 20,000 Canadian workers at the three automakers. Many business owners are not happy about CERB, or the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, since it is a disincentive for people to return to work. Ottawa announced that the pay period is set to end on September 26th. Ben Eisen is a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute, and he says with some people, they make more money on CERB, so hey, why go back to work?
Entirely logical that they might prefer not to do that and, protect their health better, stay out, stay inside, all kinds of good reasons. That's not suggest that people making those decisions are in any way lazy or gaming the system. It's that people respond rationally to incentive. And if we have a long period of time where we pay people not to work, there might be a very good reason for that during a crisis. I think there was a good reason for that during the crisis. But, as long as you have it, it's going to be an obstacle to getting full employment again.
Ben Eisen from the Fraser Institute will also talk about the federal equalization program and how it's not working for Albertans. That's coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 78 points on the day to finish at 16,575. The Dow was up 289 points to 27,976. The S&P 500 was up 46 points to 3380. The Nasdaq was up 229 points to 11,012. Oil was up 95 cents to 42.56 per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to 2.15. Gold was up a penny to 19.1584 an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 25.51 an ounce. Wheat is at $212 per metric ton, barley's at $205, canola's at $4.85, and corn is at $222 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $1.28 to $109.58. Feeder cattle were up $1.33 to $147.95, and lean hogs were down 23 cents to $51.60. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.45 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the leader of the Bloc Québécois is demanding the resignations of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Finance Minister Bill Morneau, and Trudeau's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford. Yves-François Blanchet says he will try to trigger an election in October if the three do not step down. Blanchet says keeping people in office who are mismanaging the government is very dangerous. Blanchet is referring to the recent controversies surrounding the Trudeau Liberals, including the wheat charity scandal and the recent $84 million rent subsidy program. Now, speaking of controversies, there was a company in Quebec which was awarded a contract by the Liberals to produce a large quantity of masks, over 1 million of them. The only problem is that they don't have a Canadian factory. Political reporter Brian Lilly has details for us next. The wheat charity scandal has been back in the headlines this week and back before the Commons as MPs continue to grill ministers and top civil servants. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joins me once again now via Skype from Toronto. Brian, what did we learn this week?
One of the things we learned is that, well, nobody really knew that we was going to be the organization that could deliver this program and would deliver the program until the last minute. You know, one of those, what's that saying, Hal, that victory has 1,000 fathers and, you know, defeat has none? Nobody wants to admit that they were the person behind this. You know, Minister Bardish Chagger was grilled about why she held this meeting with Craig Kielburger from We on April 17th and then, or April 16th, I think it was. And then the next day, he's pitching the top civil servant on this, saying, as I discussed with Minister Chagger, here's two proposals, one for volunteering, one for youth entrepreneurship. Chagger's denying she's anything to do with this. Ian Shugart, the top civil servant. Oh, I didn't know about this until May 8th or around then, and, you know, I wasn't really involved. Carla Qualtrough, who's the Minister at Employment and Social Development, which is really the department in charge of this, says, oh, I didn't know about it either. So nobody knew about it, but it was going ahead, and it was all driven by the civil service, which actually nobody's believing at this point. We also learned that Ian Shugart, the top civil servant, takes a very narrow view of what constitutes conflict of interest, because he kept saying, well, the Prime Minister's involvement with We had been disclosed, so he didn't think there was any issue. But the problem is, and I'm just going to reach for my phone and read off a small section of the Conflict of Interest Act here, Hal, because it says that you are in conflict if you act in a way that provides an opportunity to further his or her private interest or those of his or her relatives or friends, or to improperly further another person's private interests. You know, people are trying to say, well, the PM didn't benefit or his wife didn't benefit all that much, so, you know, his mother and brother don't count. Relatives, not wife, not immediate family, relatives or friends. And so that's really why the PM's in the conflict of interest here, and why one of the many reasons I think that he'll be found guilty by the conflict of interest and ethics commissioner down the road.
Could he potentially step aside and maybe have Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland slide into the role? Yeah.
You know, I think there's a lot of pundits that would like to see that happen. There's probably many liberals that would like to see that happen now, as they're getting frustrated with the fact that their boss keeps stepping in the cow patties, as it were. But I don't see that happening. You know, I think the Conservatives would hate that idea, because Freeland is seen by many as much more competent. So be careful what you wish for if you'd really like to see the Liberal government replaced.
Now, a cool side note is that Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder has been moderating at the Ethics Committee. Is she holding her own?
She's doing very well, and I've given a shout out previously to Wayne Easter, the Liberal MP, who's been the chair at the Finance Committee, and he even had to moderate when his boss, the party leader, the PM, was there, and is very fair with everyone, and that's what Rachel Harder's doing. Very different style than Easter, but she's being fair. You know, ethics and finance are the two committees that people are watching right now. A lot of pressure on both of them. She's not showing favoritism to her own party, who are being aggressive in questioning ministers. She is keeping them to time. She's keeping the Liberals, the Bloc, the NDP to time. It's a tough job that probably doesn't get the credit or the applause that it deserves. It's a tough job, and Rachel Harder's doing a very good job at it.
Now, Brian, something we heard from the beginning is that We Charity was the only group that could deliver this program, yet we found out that they had to contract out their entire French operation to a Quebec PR firm described as liberal-friendly.
Yeah, they subcontracted out to a company called National PR. Now, the only people I've ever known at National are Conservatives. Maybe that's because that's who I know more politically than Liberals since leaving Montreal many years ago. But the National was hired to do not only you know, delivery of the program in Quebec, which is, you know, predominantly Francophone, but also Eastern Ontario, Northern Ontario, you know, the Francophone parts of Alberta, New Brunswick, everywhere, because we simply can't operate, which, you know, is actually looking like it's leading to another committee investigation, because the Official Languages Committee now wants to look at this file and say, how did such a big file go to an organization that has zero presence in Quebec, or they can't even operate in one of the two official languages? If you recall, the YMCA is one of the groups the government said that they reached out to and talked to, but they couldn't handle it. And the Y, which is able to operate in English and French across the entire country said, no, we could. And they'd be able to do it in both languages. So this is another knock against the government narrative, which has changed a lot. And most of what they've told us doesn't hold up to scrutiny. This is all on the government, by the way. This is not on we. This is on how the government handled this, which has been badly from the beginning.
Now, we is not the only controversy surrounding the Trudeau Liberals right now. There was a company that was awarded a huge contract to deliver over 1 million masks, even though, Brian, they don't have a factory.
Yeah, this was, a ton of masks for a Made in Canada project. It's bizarre that we've got 3 different things. We'll get to the third one in a minute. 3 different contracts, 3 different big programs that are all related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the government, like all governments across the province, have been riding pretty high in the polls. Canadians will flock to their government in times of a crisis, regardless of political stripe. It's like a wartime president in the U.S. Flock to the leader, support the leader. That's what was happening. But now you've got the we problem, which was related to COVID-19. You've got this delivery of surgical and N95 masks. This was a contract awarded to a company called AMD Medicon. They're out of Pointe Claire, Quebec. That's in the Montreal area. They closed their factory in Granby, Quebec, just south of Montreal, last year, 2019. They were supposed to be up and running with a new factory and delivering masks by July. But as of this week, no masks delivered, no idea when it'll start happening. And there's a lot of other companies that were able to retool their factories. I think we've got about a dozen in Ontario, and I know there's others in other provinces, other jurisdictions that are already delivering masks. They didn't even get a chance to bid on this contract. It was just given to this company. So expect a lot more questions out of that from the industry, from critics of the government, the opposition, and so on. It's not a good look.
Can we expect some of those tax dollars coming back? Are they going to refund the money?
Well, I'm not sure how much they've been paid. It's a $382 million contract over, I believe, 10 years. But how much has been fronted, I don't know. I do know the government of Quebec gave this same firm $30 million to build their factory, and that was months ago. It hasn't happened yet. So this is taking a lot longer than it should have and not delivering the results, kind of like the we situation.
Now, a program that the Canadian Federation of Independent Business described as a disaster is also in the news, Brian. The feds granted the management of the commercial rent subsidy program to a company with very tight Liberal ties. Tell me about some of those ties.
Well, it's more one individual. This is a company, by the way, full disclosure, the company's name is MCAP. They held my mortgage for well over a decade. Good company in the residential and commercial mortgage business, but they don't deal in rent. That's not their ballywick at all. And so it's a bit bizarre that they got the contract. Now, part of the government line on this is, well, they had to contract it out because Canada Mortgage and Housing, the government organization that wanted to do this, doesn't really deal with commercial rent. Okay, so why give it to MCAP, which deals with Canada Mortgage and Housing a lot, but also doesn't do commercial rent? There is the senior vice president at MCAP who joined in January. His name is Rob Silver. His wife is Katie Telford, the chief of staff to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Now, the government says there was a conflict of interest screen set up between her and her husband. Any, information, communication, deals involving her husband's company were not supposed to come to her. But questions have been raised about whether Silver was communicating with key members of the government or certain departments, some of those not answering, and in fact refusing to answer reporters' questions on this, which is only leading to more questions. There is a good chance that nothing untoward's happened here, but it comes back to the appearance, and you start building a narrative of a government using a pandemic to reward their friends or to reward companies that are close to them or in the right province, and it starts to wear on the government. So, this is one that may end up being a nothing burger in terms of substance, but it's going to hurt the government in terms of perception.
Now, questions about Governor General Julie Payette's management style are still in the news, Brian. That includes her past work, expenses, and chatter of her potentially losing her job.
Yeah, there's people saying, well, will the government get rid of her? And technically, they can't. but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. The Governor General is appointed by the Queen on the advice of the Governor and Council, which is Cabinet. Really, it's the Prime Minister who calls up the Queen and says, here's a recommendation. And the monarch says, yes, that will be my vice-regal representative in Canada. But there's been this slow drip of stories that make Julie Payette look really bad. Questions about, is she too hard on staff? Does she leave them in tears? Did she ask for too much privacy in terms of what was described as a secret staircase? Now, Rideau Hall has pushed back a little bit and said, well, that wasn't actually us. That was the National Capital Commission, which runs Rideau Hall. And by the way, those gates that you have to pass through for safety, the swipe card type gates, well, those are standard and just to stop tourists from wandering into offices. So I have to wonder what is behind this. And to me, Hal, this looks like the government's fingerprints are on it. They're fed up with being the center of negative attention when it comes to issues like we and the other programs we just talked about, and they're trying to throw the Governor General under the bus. It's a bizarre way to try and change the channel, because at the end of the day, Julie Payette was Justin Trudeau's choice. So if this is coming from the government, and it's hard to see how some of it's not, given what has been leaked repeatedly to CBC, the government's favorite news outlet, if it's being leaked to them and it's detailed government information, I'm not sure where else it comes from. So it's a bad look for the Governor General, but it's also a bad look for the government. Could the PM fire her? No. Could he make his views known and try and force her to resign? Absolutely. Could he call the Queen and ask for her to be replaced? That would be an extraordinary step, but one that could happen. She is, of course, under investigation by the Privy Council office over how she treats her staff, and that'll be a couple of months before we see that report.
Now, speaking of someone potentially being fired, there's talk in Ottawa that we could see a cabinet shuffle, as there may be a little bit of tension between Trudeau and his finance minister, Bill Morneau. Could Morneau lose that portfolio? And if so, Brian, who would his successor be?
Well, the talk of successor is what prompted the idea that Bill Morneau could be out. I will say, before I tell you about the successor, that the Prime Minister's office has done the unusual step of issuing a statement saying, no, we've got full confidence in Minister Morneau. This is not going to happen. How many times have we seen that with a hockey coach just before they're fired? The general manager comes out, says, I've got full confidence in Buddy, what's his name? And 2 days later, Buddy is packing up his locker and leaving for another city. So I'm not going to say it's not happening, but the PMO says not right now. This all started because you've got, obviously, Bill Morneau in trouble in the We controversy, taking that trip worth $41,000, and who among us hasn't taken a $41,000 trip that we forgot to pay for? I mean, just last week, no, never actually. But so he's in trouble over that. I heard one Liberal pundit describe the finance response to the COVID pandemic as the weak sister. So even on television and radio, you're starting to hear Liberal pundits say bad things about Bill Morneau, which is a bit surprising for me. So this could still happen. And at the same time, we're learning through business media reporting that it's Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, who left, became governor of Bank of England. He stepped down from that post after, I think, 6 or 7 years, and he's back in Canada now. There's always been talk about Carney being close to the Liberals. He worked well with Stephen Harper and Jim Flaherty during the 2008-2009 recession, but his politics do lean more on the progressive left side. So, there's been talk about him being a potential replacement for Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader down the road. Is he going to replace Bill Morneau? Well, he's already acting as an informal advisor to the Prime Minister, so we'll see if that creates some tension and if this rumor of shuffle comes back, just like the hockey general manager comes back to fire the coach later on.
Typical Canadian response. I love that, always referencing hockey. Brian, borders have been closed for quite some time, yet Canada is still receiving international flights with more than a dozen people arriving into our country testing positive for COVID-19. How are we allowing things like this to happen?
Well, international flights have never fully stopped. They were shut down from some countries. If you remember, we had our last flight from Italy when they were in the middle of their lockdown and pandemic. But some of these have restarted. It's very limited compared to what it was pre-pandemic. It is a trickle, comparatively speaking. Oftentimes these are Canadians returning home. We can try and stop other foreign nationals from coming in, although we don't always do that, but we can't stop Canadians from coming home. So there is limited international travel still going on through airports like Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. Those are the main ones. And since the beginning of August, 18 people, could be more now, these are fluid numbers, but as of the current report I'm reading, 18 people testing positive for COVID-19. I'm glad they're catching them at the airport. Let's hope that, unlike in February and March, we're actually forcing them to quarantine when they get here. This is part of why we were hit with COVID-19 in the way that we were. We weren't forcing people to quarantine when they came in from hotspots, be it China in the early days, Iran and Egypt later on, Italy, Germany, or eventually the United States. We just didn't do it until it was here in too great a numbers and we had community transmission. We've got to watch for that. Auckland, New Zealand, went more than 100 days without cases. They're seeing cases reappear. New Brunswick, which had very few cases, they're seeing a resurgence, just a little bit, but we have to be vigilant about this. Alberta's done well, BC's done well. Ontario has turned the corner and has very low numbers. We don't want to be going back up, and we definitely don't want to be going into another lockdown.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Many Albertans, including our very own Premier Jason Kenney, are not happy with how much our province gives out in equalization payments each and every year. To talk more about it, more detail, is Ben Eisen. Ben is a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute and is co-author of the report, Equalization and Stabilization Post-Recession, Is Canada Ready? Ben, welcome to BCN.
Thanks so much.
So Ben, can you briefly explain how equalization really works and its purpose?
It's a relatively straightforward program. There's some complexities in the details, but big picture, it's relatively straightforward. What happens is the federal government collects tax revenue, just like from people all across, people and businesses all across the country, and it goes into the general revenue. And one of the things that they use that money for is the equalization program. And the equalization program is pretty simple. What it does is it takes federal revenue and it sends it, just pretty much direct cash payments, to lower income provinces in the country, to provinces that are deemed to be less able to provide quality public services to their residents without higher levels of taxation. So it's pretty straightforward. The federal government figures out through a formula which the lower income provinces are and sends their government some money.
Alberta's been forking out billions upon billions of dollars each and every year. Premier Kenney's talked about how much Quebec has received, Ontario has received. Alberta sometimes has received the short end of the stick. Will our province be receiving some of that money back as we're still trying to recover from a pre-COVID-19 recession?
No, Alberta will not receive any equalization payments now or the foreseeable future. The reason for that is that Alberta still, despite all of the terrible economic hardship, still has higher average incomes than people in most other parts of the country, than in any other province, actually. So the way that equalization works, Alberta can't become eligible. But what's interesting is that Alberta has also not been eligible for very significant payments under the stabilization program. That's a cousin of the equalization program, designed to help provinces, even if they're higher income like Alberta, that have taken a hard hit. And quirks of the program, that one, have meant that it really has provided very little help for Alberta during this very difficult time. So if you sort of think of the two together, equalization and its less known friend, the stabilization program, you can say that they haven't served Alberta well and that Alberta's received very little money out of either program.
Ben, should Alberta have received some payments perhaps during the oil collapse in 2014?
Well, Alberta did receive at that time some stabilization payments, but they're just a drop in the bucket in terms of how small. There's an arbitrary cap on the amount. It's $60 per person. The reasons for that cap are sort of silly. They're rooted in an event that happened in the lumber industry in British Columbia in the 1980s. It's ad hoc and arbitrary, and it's not well designed or thought through. So Alberta did receive a small amount of money through stabilization back then, but the amount was not determined by a sensible formula. If you want to have a stabilization program that's designed to help governments deal with it when there's serious shocks to the economy, such as occurred in Alberta in 2014-15, and such is happening again today, then that program needs a fundamental rethink, because right now it's designed so that it can do no more but deliver a drop in the bucket to help a province like Alberta when it's going through a shock like it is today.
Do you think we will ever have a referendum here in Alberta on equalization, Ben? And if so, would the federal Liberals even listen or take notice?
Well, the Premier says that there will be a referendum. Premier Kenney says there will be a referendum. The Fair Deal panel, which the government struck, recommended a referendum on equalization. So the signs do look like it will happen. I can't quite guess how other governments will respond. It is a federal government program, so it becomes a little bit hard to know exactly what that will look like, what the negotiations would be, what the role of other provinces would be, in a little bit of uncharted territory with one province having a referendum on a specific federal program. But there could be movement in terms of its role in the Constitution, and perhaps one theory holds that the whole purpose of this is to start a broader conversation, not just about equalization, but about fiscal transfers generally, about the thick network of programs by which the federal government collects a lot of money and sends it to the various provinces. And that goes beyond equalization. And so maybe a referendum could trigger a rethink on a lot of those things, and then perhaps something good would come of it.
What kind of percentage do you think we would see of Albertans saying that, you know what, we shouldn't dish out so many billions of dollars each and every year through equalization? 80 to 90% of Albertans?
I won't speculate because I try and steer clear of public opinion and political guessing about political outcomes. But I'll say this, and for Alberta, equalization is a large federal program. It's about a $20 billion a year program, and it's a program from which Albertans receive no direct benefit. So the fact that it's unpopular in Alberta only makes perfect sense. And for taxpayers elsewhere, residents elsewhere in the country who struggle or who wonder why equalization is such a point of friction and tension, I think it's worth taking a moment to think about federal programs such a large federal program that existed, let's say, that delivered no benefit whatsoever to Ontario. Would we expect it to be popular in Ontario or Quebec if there was a big federal program as big as $20 billion that delivered no direct benefits to Quebec? Would we expect that program to be popular there? No. So the equalization's lack of popularity in Alberta makes perfect sense to me, and it is, in fact, in my view, entirely predictable.
You know, the equalization payments as well here in Alberta have given rise to the Wexit Party, the separatist party here in Alberta. You know, people are saying we should take our money and run. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a political outcome in and of itself, but there are huge advantages to being part of a larger, diversified country, particularly going through difficult times such as now that we can see. And there's also there would certainly be a lot of political uncertainty, economic uncertainty from investors wondering, hey, what would something like that look like? And there's a lot of good evidence that political uncertainty is bad for the economy. It hurts growth. And things of that nature. So I think there'd be a lot to worry about in terms of the effect on political stability, investors thinking, hey, what's this going to really look like? And we saw that. We saw that happen in Quebec a lot of during the separatist movement. A lot of businesses and capital fled out of Montreal. And so it's something to keep in mind that there can be damage caused by the uncertainty that these things can create.
Now, Ben, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about the current equalization program. Provinces receive payments based on their fiscal capacity, but how else does it work?
Well, the fiscal capacity calculation is quite complicated. What that means is it evaluates each province's ability. Let's say they all have the same tax rates. If you would generate more money, you have higher fiscal capacity. If you have less money, you have lower fiscal capacity. But it also calculates. It also includes natural resource revenue. Approximately 50%. It's 50%. The formula is a little quirky and not worth getting into, but for the sake of simplicity, natural resource revenue also feeds into that, and that's problematic in terms of the incentives that it creates, because in have-not provinces, Quebec, Manitoba, there's been disincentives towards the actual generation of natural resource revenue because people respond to incentives. When they see their receipts of those revenues go up, equalization goes down almost commensurately. So certainly it's very important when we're looking at equalization and its related programs to take a hard look at what are the incentives that this is creating, and is it creating incentives for growth? Is it creating incentives for national cohesion? Or is it creating incentives for different kinds of public policy and frankly serving to create tension? And when the program is creating tension rather than unity, I'd go so far as to say that it's really failing to achieve one of its key purposes, which should be to bring Canadians together.
Why do you think Ottawa would come up with like Bill C-69, preventing a lot of oil pipelines and regulations on our energy sector when you need that money to help support equalization payments. It's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, the expression goes.
And that, I think, is a major source of frustration in Alberta, that there's a sense, and not just a sense, there has been real challenges to the creation of energy infrastructure in the province that have been created by policymaking in other parts of the country. And that is a huge source of frustration. Albertans, like people in any other province in the country, want to prosper. They want to be able to make use of the natural resources they have. They want to be able to get global prices for their resources rather than something less, which is what happens when you have a lack of pipeline access. So I think on that point, and certainly all of Canada benefits from a prosperous Alberta. As you say, it contributes more to equalization payments. Not just equalization, though, it contributes more per person to all federal programming when Alberta's thriving and people are making high incomes and paying high income taxes. All of Canada benefits from a strong Alberta. And in fact, Canada is badly weakened by a weak Alberta. And so certainly a frustration surrounding laws that made the development of the energy infrastructure impossible for so long. I think frustration surrounding that is entirely reasonable.
Ben, an oil tanker carrying Alberta crude just completed a 1-month journey through the Panama Canal because there was no pipeline from BC to the East Coast, to carry that Alberta crude. That was a 12,000-kilometer trek. Ben, many agree this is simply ridiculous. Will we eventually see a pipeline from the west to the East Coast so people can use Alberta oil?
Well, I don't know what we will see, but I will, because I try not to make predictions, but I will say this, the case for moving oil through pipelines is very strong, even particularly if we want to focus on the environmental effects. There's very strong evidence that if you move oil through pipelines, you're much less likely to create environmental damages at the local level than if you move it all the other ways that you can move it. You move it by rail. You just mentioned a long voyage of a ship. Something can go wrong, can easily go wrong there. But certainly the evidence is crystal clear that pipelines are a much safer way to move oil across the country than oil by rail, which is the #1 replacement when pipelines don't exist or are inadequate. So from an environmental perspective, there's a very good reason to be supportive to the development of good, high-quality energy infrastructure, including pipelines in Alberta, if the market can bear it.
Stats Canada says the Canadian economy has shrank by 8% over the first few months of 2020 because of the COVID-19 virus. Now, in your opinion, how long will it take for the economy to really bounce back?
Oh, I wish I knew. It's going to be a challenge. There's going to be a partial. With the reopening, there will be a strong uptick. People go from no economic activity to some economic activity. But it's not going to drive you all the way back to where you started in terms of undoing all of the economic damage. There's still big challenges in terms of getting people to work safely, making sure that people have safe places to put their kids so that they can go and do their jobs. I don't know how long it will take Canada to get out of this, to really get going again economically, get back to the place where it was before all this. I can't make a prediction on that front, but I can say it's not going to. I don't think it's going to be a really fast process because we haven't solved all the problems that we need to solve to get a recovery going full speed ahead.
Now, due to the changes in our economy, Ben, do you think maybe some of the current programs, the federal programs, are actually working?
They're achieving some of their goals while creating other obstacles. You think about a program like the CERB program, which is replacing income that's been lost for people, and that has certainly achieved certain goals, some very important goals in terms of bridging people through hardship, helping families that otherwise would have been in terrible circumstances and perhaps faced insolvency. So it's certainly achieved some of its very important objectives. But now we're reaching a point where, as you mentioned, the issue of recovery has come about, and there's now real questions about incentives for people to return to work. If people can make almost the exact same amount of money on CERB as they would going to work a 30 or 40-hour week, it's entirely logical that they might prefer not to do that and protect their health better, stay inside, all kinds of good reasons. That's not to suggest that people making those decisions are in any way lazy or gaming the system. It's that people respond rationally to incentives. And if we have a long period of time where we pay people not to work, there might be a very good reason for that during a crisis. I think there was a good reason for that during the crisis. But as long as you have it, it's going to be an obstacle to getting full employment again, and it's going to be an obstacle to getting the kind of full speed ahead recovery that we would all like Canada to have eventually, and once it's safe.
So maybe some policy changes that would improve the situation, such as maybe phasing out the CERB payments?
it's going to have to be. I think it's going to have to be phased out eventually. It can't go on like this permanently. It's extremely expensive, and we're already seeing deficits pile up at the federal level, over $300 billion. The provinces themselves are facing fiscal challenges. My view is that CERB is going to have to be unwound eventually. Unwinding it won't be easy, especially if the economy hasn't fully recovered. There's always going to be concern. You don't want a situation in which you're creating terrible economic hardship for Canadians. So you want to be sensitive to the challenges of the COVID recession while recognizing that if you pay people not to work as much as they would to work indefinitely, you're going to have labor market problems. So I don't envy any of the people making these decisions. They're hard choices. They're difficult policy changes. But the programs that have been implemented, the CERB program, the CEWS, the wage subsidy, they're simply, in my view, not sustainable in the long run. And the governments need to be thinking now about how they're going to unwind them, because I'll tell you, it's not going to be an easy trick.
You know, you touched on that. You're right. The deficit is $343 billion. The debt's approaching $1.2 trillion. So, and I mean, this is money that we have to pay back eventually. Ben, how much will the new NAFTA or the USMCA really help our economy get back on track?
It certainly is better than if there were lots of new protectionism. There was sort of concern of that a few years back, that fundamentally there might be fundamental changes in the Canada-U.S. trade relationship. That doesn't seem to have come to pass, and that's good news. Freer trade between Canada and the United States has generally helped the economy and been good. That said, in the short term, we have barriers between our two countries that would have been unimaginable a year ago, in terms of not having people being able to flow back and forth between the two places, disruption of commerce and supply chains. So free trade between Canada and the United States is great. It won't be able to have its full positive effects until we're able to open up borders again and let people go back and forth. And that's not probably going to happen until the virus is under control in both countries, which is potentially some ways away.
Ben Eisen, Senior Fellow from the Fraser Institute, thanks for joining me today from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.